another episode of the Candid Conversation with Adam Lopez. I am your host, Adam. And today, guess what? We have a special edition. It's going to be the American Cancer Society Latinos Contra Cancer edition. And I am very honored and privileged to have two bright young ladies who are volunteers for Latinos Contra Cancer. I want to welcome Victoria Rodriguez. She's a doctoral student at UC Irvine. And we have Carol Ochoa, Dr. Ochoa, who's also a volunteer, and she's from USC. Victoria and Carol, welcome to the program.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Absolutely. So this edition, this segment is actually very special, and it's for a first of its kind for this podcast, because it's not only a nonprofit, but it's a very, very special organization to me. As I think I've shared with you, my mother's a two-time cancer survivor, breast cancer and bladder cancer. So for me to be on the board of directors for American Cancer Society LA region, to be part of the Latinos Contra Cancer movement and chapter, and to work alongside both of you, it's something that's very dear to my heart, and I think we're doing something really good. So first of all, I want to thank you for being on the program, giving me some of your time on this Tuesday afternoon. You both are volunteers at LCC, but there's a lot of information we can share. I want to start off by saying this, Victoria. I'll start with you, Victoria. What motivated you? What encouraged you, motivated you to do this work and to be a volunteer with this special organization?
Yeah, I would say it's kind of a little bit of my professional experiences and a little bit of my personal experiences. So I have a background in psychology, and then also I got my master's in social work and my master's in public health. And I was always really interested in kind of healthcare accessibility and healthcare quality, and, you know, how Latinos in particular, just how do they get good care and how do they access care, and kind of the barriers to that. But kind of like you, actually, my mother is also a two-time cancer survivor. So she had uterine cancer in 2011 and then breast cancer in 2018. And kind of just seeing her experiences kind of through going through cancer, and you know, the doctors are really there to treat the cancer, and then after that it's kind of like, okay, you know, do your follow-ups. But I found that there wasn't really a lot of support for cancer survivors, you know, once treatment was done. So that's really what motivated me to kind of, you know, do more and support cancer survivors more in all the aspects that, you know, they're having cancer affects their life.
Well, that's amazing, Victoria. And it looks like we have a emotional attachment, right? Because we had a family member. So now I'll go to you, Carol. What motivated you? What encouraged you to be part of something like Latinos Contra Cancer?
Yeah, so similar. I think many of us that do this work were personally impacted, whether it's ourselves or our family. So for me, it was my grandmother, who was a two-time cancer survivor, but she actually passed away in 2016. And so first she had breast cancer survivor, which is one of the more safer cancers, I would say, like the actual survival. And then her second diagnosis was pancreatic cancer, which is known more as a terminal illness. And it was through that experience that I really learned how detrimental, like all aspects of health for both the survivor and the family is. And that's what really motivated me to do the work that I do, in order to try to provide supportive care to families and survivors, because beyond treating the illness, as Victoria mentioned, it's also how do we help with the quality of life and the family members as well.
Yeah, well, thank you for sharing that, Carol. You know, it looks like when we go into this type of work, it's because we saw firsthand how it affected our family member, right? Or how it's affecting our family member. We saw firsthand maybe the lack of support, the lack of resources, the lack of information, especially with the Hispanic community. And I think that's one of the targets, right, with this chapter, Latino Contra Cancer, under American Cancer Society, is working with the Latino community. But there's also other factors, not just Latinos, but it's just minority, underprivileged, underserved in general. There's so much work to be done. And I can see that you both are passionate, just like I am. We're passionate about this great agency. We're passionate about doing great work to bring more awareness, you know, to our loved ones, to our relatives, to our community. You know, a lot of people are going to be watching and hearing this episode, this podcast, and it can be people who are currently going through a situation of cancer, who have a family member, a relative, a neighbor, a friend who are going through cancer, or simply somebody who just wants to learn more about what we actually do. And later on in the episode, we can give information about how to contact us. But this is a segue to my next question: I'll start with you, Carol, on this one. What, in your opinion, what are the major issues, with cancer survivorship? If you can share a little bit.
Sure. So to begin with, we've been talking about cancer survivors, and we will kind of just wanted to start off with what we consider cancer survivor. Basically, anyone from time of diagnosis till, end of life can be considered a cancer survivor. And in some cases, caregivers or those that are caring for the survivor are also sort of under this umbrella of cancer survivors. So just wanted to give a brief sort of definition, I would say. And
Sure.
some of the major issues that within cancer survivorship that sort of both Victoria and I really focus on are psychosocial. As we mentioned, we have personal experiences where family members beyond their physical health, meaning, if they experience a lot of pain, just like a lot of weight loss, those are the physical health things that we can see. Hair loss, we know that sometimes survivors lose their hair or decide that to just shave their hair. Psychosocial health is something that we don't talk about enough, and that really impacts survivors. Cancer survivorship and sort of treatment and everything they go through can take a toll on their mental health. So that is one aspect that we really focus on. And then also, I don't know if Victoria wants to add a second.
Yeah, another one that also doesn't really get talked about is financial health and financial well-being, because a lot of times the cost of treatment is a lot. Even if you do have health insurance, it's still a substantial amount that you have to pay out of pocket. So a lot of times we see that cancer survivors have all of this debt, medical debt, that they have to now deal with, in addition to experiencing cancer and the physical aspects, the psychosocial aspects.
Yeah.
So that's another really big one that really impacts this community.
It's very interesting that you're both talking about that, because last week I was part of the Ask Day with the American Cancer Society. We were talking to local assemblymen and women and also senators to ask, their support on certain legislations coming up. And one of them was the budgeting. One of them was, help us for more research. But it's interesting you said about some of the issues is the mental health, the financial health, because I shared this story with one of the senators. I said, look, when my mother told me back in 2004 that she had breast cancer, that in itself, it's already demeaning in nature to a woman to hear. It's very detrimental, right? So now they're dealing with the emotional aspects of it, right? And then to have to deal with either they don't have health insurance, or they have to deal with Medicare, or they have to now navigate the issues of trying to get proper treatment, and then have to deal with the financial burden. Nobody talks about that. And I think that is an important topic, and it's very relevant of why we want to get the message out there, that is something that it's hardly talked about, and we need to put more attention and more resources. So thank you very much, both of you, for sharing that, which takes us now to the next, the next question here. And I'll start with you, Victoria, is we know that, like I mentioned before, not only the Latino community, but just the minority in general, underserved population, underprivileged communities. What are some ways that these communities can get involved in research? If you would give some examples.
Yeah, I mean, there's always opportunities either at the clinics or the hospitals that you do get treatment, or at surrounding universities that put out calls for cancer survivors, or they put out calls of, even if you're in treatment, to participate in research. And I think that's a lot of times a lot of Latinos really do not participate in research, and this kind of has a history of medical mistrust and not really knowing. So like one, medical mistrust, but also just not knowing how to get involved, and not knowing who to ask or what it entails. And sometimes, research does ask a lot, but it's just, it's important for Latinos to get involved so that we can see what are really the most important issues that Latinos are impacted by. And it's so empowering to share stories, and to really, a lot of times once you talk to someone, it's like, oh, yeah, my mother also had cancer, my brother had cancer, my father had cancer, my friend had cancer. And it's everyone is impacted by this. And I think also just, aside from getting involved in research, just really sharing your stories with one another. It's really empowering to kind of just shed light on these experiences.
No, and you're absolutely right. And before I go to Carol, one of the things that I always tell people whenever I speak or present, especially here in Ventura County, that is a real barrier. That is a real challenge when you're dealing with the Latino community. Let me give you an example. You're never going to get a large support population of Latinos jumping on a Zoom seminar presentation. You're not going to get a population of Latino community going to a workshop at a local performing arts center. It just, for some reason, the culture, the history, that's just not what they're used to. It's almost like we have to go to them. So to be able to what I say is that when I say educate meaning like get informed. You need to get knowledge, right? There's a lot of information out there. How can we get involved? And many people, trust me, a lot of people want to get involved, but you're right, Victoria, they just don't know how. They don't know the information. They don't know where. They don't know who to ask, and they're not going to ask for it. So we have to find a platform or a way to be able to get this information to the Latino population, the Latino communities, so they can be able to participate. Because it's not going to be through Zoom. It's not going to be on a seminar, a convention, or workshop. We have to find other strategies. So that was a very good point. So Carol, how about yourself? What are the other ways that you think the Latino community can get involved?
Yeah, adding on to Victoria. So again, one of the things that I really also focus on is family and caregivers. So I would say that also kind of adding to the last question you asked is about major issues. Like it's also like focusing on caregivers and how we can support them since they are the ones supporting the survivors. So that kind of one thing I wanted to add to the last question and also bring it to this question because caregivers are so important for this as well, and they can also get involved in research. And there's also sometimes, in addition to sort of these research studies that Victoria mentioned, there's also sometimes things such as interventions that both cancer survivors and caregivers can get involved with in order to sort of try to figure out what's the best way to help improve their sort of overall health or well-being. So that's one way that they can also get involved in addition to sharing their own stories. And then as we sort of were mentioning, being a part of panels or advocating, sort of like what you said that you're doing on behalf of your mom, like going to and sharing personal stories in order to raise awareness and ask, our government and funding mechanisms to really put more resources to help, especially with the Hispanic Latino communities that we know, in addition to medical mistrust, there's also sometimes issues with language and sort of being able to communicate these stories in Spanish to an English audience. So we need to also hear the Spanish-speaking Latino stories because some of their issues might be different than someone that speaks English and is of the Hispanic Latino background.
Well, so we bring up very good points, and this is very, very good information for all our listeners and our viewers. We are speaking with Victoria Rodriguez and Carol Ochoa, who are volunteers at Latino Contra Cancer, which is under the umbrella of the American Cancer Society. If anybody has any questions, wants to learn more about what American Cancer Society does and what Latino Contra Cancer is doing, you can visit the website at www.cancer.org. It's going to be in the bottom of your screen. And now, ladies, we're going to get into the last part of this interview, which is of two very important questions or very important topics of discussion. Number one is there are a lot of different resources and support and tools that the American Cancer Society provides and gives, both in English, in Spanish. It can be guides, it can be counseling. There's even a cancer hotline. There's a lot that the American Cancer Society provides. But to your point, Victoria, maybe it's just they're not aware. The Latino community is not aware. They don't have knowledge. So can you explain? I'll start with you, Carol. Explain a little bit what are some of the available resources that the American Cancer Society has and provides?
Yeah, so I'll start off with some of the financial resources. If you go to the National Cancer Survivorship Resource Center on the cancer.org website, you can sort of navigate this website and there is an option to sort of have it in Spanish. So you can select whether you're English or Spanish speaking to kind of look at the different resources that are available. And there you'll find videos, different materials, whether they're reports. And one of the things before this meeting, we also went and kind of looked at it. And one of the things that I thought was very helpful were some of the financial resources that we were able to find there. So for instance, there's the Hope Lodge, which provides patients and caregivers a place to stay at when they're undergoing treatment. As we know that this can be an issue, sometimes Hispanic Latinos don't live near the clinic or hospital that they're getting their service for, and we don't want their treatment to be delayed. So this is something that ACS provides. And then there's also the American Cancer Society's Road to Recovery program, which in the past, right now, because of COVID, I think there's a bit of sort of a break, but they've helped provide transportation sort of resources for those that are also getting cancer treatment. Because once again, what they're trying to do is eliminate some of these barriers that they might have if they don't have someone that can give them a ride, or they themselves don't have a car. So those are two things that I thought were very helpful, especially for the Latino community. And then there's just a lot of different resources as far as link for survivors. So sort of some reports about what life looks like after treatment. You know, you get the diagnosis, and then there's this long process of things that you need to do for your treatment. And there's just a lot of information that you're given at once. So having a report that you can go back to is helpful as you're kind of navigating that process. So those are the three that I would highlight.
I think those are great, and you're right. And there's just a lot of resources, and you mentioned some very important ones that are key. I don't know if you have something to add, Victoria, to this.
Yeah, I think one thing that I wanted to add, that in addition to resources for survivors, there's also resources for healthcare professionals and also those that want to get involved in advocacy for cancer survivors. So I think it's also important that, you know, those that even if they already work with cancer survivors, there's also resources available to kind of help them with their work. So it's important for others to look at that as well.
No, that's amazing information. Like I mentioned earlier, if somebody wants to get more information, visit the website. It's going to be at the bottom of your screen. I'm going to say it for our listeners. It's www.cancer.org. Very simple. Go in there and you'll find a menu of information, resources. And like I mentioned, there's also a cancer helpline that can provide much information. That's 1-800-227-2345. Once again, it's 800 227-2345. I'll also have it on the bottom of the screen for our viewers as well. Well, ladies, we have come to the end of this interview, but we do have one last question left, which is also very important for all of us to understand and kind of hear eventually what is the ultimate objective and the purpose of what we want to accomplish. And that is, I'll start with you, Victoria. What do you hope to achieve through cancer research? And this can be in multiple levels, but you personally, you shared your story with your relative, and just like Carol and myself, you know, and we wish we can change the world, right? We wish we can have $50 million to just throw to cancer research because it's very dear to our heart. But based on what you lived and what you know and how much you're involved in volunteering, you know, what do you hope to achieve through cancer research?
Yeah, that's a great question. And like you said, you know, sometimes I think as researchers, we have really broad goals, or, you know, we want to like really change the world.
Yeah.
So kind of my change the world answer, that really is like making sure that no matter your race, no matter your ethnicity or your socioeconomic status, everyone's getting the same cancer treatment. Everyone has the kind of same chance to have good cancer survival and good quality of life afterwards. And I think that's really the kind of overarching dream that I keep, that motivates me to do this work, and just making sure that everyone is kind of on the same level playing field of, you know, if they get cancer, they'll still have an optimal life afterwards.
That's amazing, Victoria. Thanks for sharing. Now I'll go with you, Carol, as well, as we end with this question is, what do you, the same thing with Victoria, you shared your story, relative passed away. When somebody passes away, there's probably even more initiative to want to advocate for more and more and more. What do you hope to achieve through cancer research, Carol?
Yeah, so my sort of goal with cancer research similar is to raise awareness and knowledge about a lot of the resources that Hispanic Latino communities aren't aware of or don't participate in. So for instance, as I mentioned, my grandmother had pancreatic cancer, and one of the things that she benefited from was palliative care, which is a type of supportive care that really focuses on, different aspects of her health, not just her physical health. And, we don't like to think about death, but these are things that at some point we have to prepare for. And having that service really helped my grandmother sort of plan and think ahead. And, it came to the point where she decided, I don't want to die in a hospital. So she got into hospice care, which is a different type of service for end of life. And what I really want is for Latinos to be aware of these programs. I know it's a difficult topic, but the more we prepare and the more we know about what type of services we can tap into, the more it can help, because there's so much out there and we just don't know about it. And hopefully it can help alleviate some of that stress. And, it's painful for anyone to have to go through this. And that's kind of my goal with the research I do, just to try to help the circumstances. It's not ideal, but at some point we want to make it better by providing whatever needs they might need.
Well, that's amazing. We've been speaking with Victoria Rodriguez and Carol Ochoa. They just shared their heart, their intentions, what they hope to achieve through cancer research. Thank you, ladies, for sharing your story and for participating in this podcast. So, I would like to finish this interview, this episode, by giving it a personal touch. There's going to be many viewers and listeners who might be going through a rough time, who might be dealing currently with a situation that they're going through cancer themselves or a family member. They're going through financial hardships. They lost somebody like you, Carol, regardless what the situation is. And I want to finish off by having you, Victoria, and then you, Carol, just share some words of encouragement and motivation.
Yeah, I would say definitely don't be afraid to ask for help or ask for support. I think a lot of times, we try to take things on ourselves or, take things on as a family, but really knowing that there's resources and there's support out there designed to make this easier for you. So to really take advantage of that and not be afraid to just say, I don't know what to do. I need help. And I think that's important to do.
A great word of encouragement. How about you, Carol?
Same. I would say, this is a difficult time, but you have loved ones, you have the support, and, if possible, look for other things, whatever it is that you may need to get through this difficult time. There's a lot of things out there, resources, Latinos Contra Cancer, just focus on how can we help the Latino community. So hopefully, you hear this podcast, and if you guys need anything, reach out to us, and we can also kind of help link you with resources or, try to help any way that we can.
Thank you so much, ladies. I hope somebody gets encouraged and motivated today by these words. And I hope somebody actually, was able to take away from the information that we shared and look into American Cancer Society and all the resources we offer. Once again, you can look at the website, www.cancer.org. You can call the Cancer Helpline at 1-800-227-2345. And we would like to thank the American Cancer Society for allowing us to volunteer and be part of this amazing movement, organization. Latinos Contra Cancer is very special. And thank you so much, ladies, Victoria and Carol, for your time and your participation. You've been watching another episode of A Candid Conversation with Adam Lopez. I'm your host, Adam. Thank you so much for your support. Until next time, have a good afternoon.
Bye.
Bye.